Psychological safety is not about being nice. Psychological safety isn't about comfort. It's not the permission to speak per se, it is the expectation that as a member of that team, that you will voice your opinion.
Speaking up has somehow shifted the dynamics in terms of how people relate to you. You really can't fix something that people that can't speak up about.
It's really important to understand that psychological safety isn't this fluffy thing.
It doesn't even imply that we are holding hands and singing Kumbaya.
You can have redundancies and still have a culture of psychological safety.
A few years ago, an amazing study came out of the Harvard Business Review. In that study, they talked about how psychological safety is one of the biggest indicators of success for high-performing teams. I thought it would be fantastic to sit down with a couple of my co-hosts, Sem and Michelle, who are experts in this field, and actually talk to them about what psychological safety is, why it matters, and maybe some practical tips on how you can start implementing psychological safety in your teams. So, Sem and Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to have you here. So, I suppose the first thing that I really want to know is, what is psychological safety?
The concept of psychological safety has been around for quite a few years. Professor Amy Edmondson back in the late 1990s first started to describe psychological safety as an attribute of the way teams interact and the culture within those teams. It's within those teams that there is a culture where speaking up is embraced and it's valued, that everybody has something unique to contribute, that it's okay to speak up even if it is going against the general consensus or the general view within that team.
I really like it. So what I'm hearing is it's kind of the first part of psychological safety, or at least what I got out of that is, it's the ability to feel heard even when your opinion is the opposite of what everyone else is saying. Have I got that right, or is there some
Sort
nuance
of.
to that?
There's some nuances. So it's not just about being heard. It's about have this reassurance that you have permission to speak up. But before you can be heard, you need to feel and believe that in that team, the culture of the workplace where you are provides you and values your opinion, and that you have the right, regardless of whether the opinion is the one that is being held by the majority, that your opinion is just as valid, and that there will be no retribution as a result of you speaking up in that, whether that's a meeting, whatever the forum might be.
I'm quite interested in that word you kind of framed it around permission. So I suppose in my mind, everyone has permission to speak generally. It's not like you're muzzled. I mean, I guess these days on Teams calls or Zoom or whatever you use, you literally can be muted. But outside of those kind of more aggressive leadership actions, like what does permission mean in this context?
Can I take the concept of permission and maybe flip that a little bit? Because I think where you have high-performing teams, and remember Amy Edmondson linked her work to psychological safety being a condition that needed to be existing for high-performing teams. It's not the permission to speak per se, it is the expectation that as a member of that team, that you will voice your opinion, whether it's contrary to other people's opinions or not. And I think that's important because it's about the tone that is set and the expectations of that group of people, that team interacting. And it's an expectation that you bring something valuable to that team, and you are expected to speak up if you have a different opinion. And that's where it fits in high-performing teams.
That's super fascinating. So when you talk about permission in this context, what you're really saying is it's like you have permission to be awesome. And part of being awesome is you speak up and say, this is what I think, regardless of however many other people and what level of seniority have said something completely different to you. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, and that's right. And the reason that that's important is because if you as a business owner or a leader of that team, you want execution excellence and you want to be able to deliver your performance. Having those robust conversations where everybody's idea is valued and everything's on the table means that you are more likely to make the right decision before you either invest in something or start a project, that you are actually accelerating that project, but setting yourself up for success because you have garnered the views of all of the people in the room.
It kind of it supports the idea that when people speak up and voice for their opinion, you then have diversity of thought. So
Right.
it's where innovation, you kind of see different ideas that, outside the box thinking, because people have got that expectation that they would speak up and they would share their thoughts. Because again, on the other side, what it kind of really implies that you really can't fix something that people that can't speak up about. So on the opposite is if there were issues as well that are actually getting in the way of the success. When there's an expectation that people will speak up, that includes when things aren't working very well. Not just about, these are the greatest idea to make us successful. It's also about these are some of the hurdles that are actually getting in the way for our success.
So it's almost like I'm just picturing some meetings I've had in the past, that squeaky wheel type scenario where it's obvious to everyone working in the team that there's a problem, but because no one is allowed to say, talk up about it, it never gets fixed. Whereas what you're saying is you create a culture where people who are observing those challenges can just bring them up and they're not going to get retribution, I think is the word you use, which I'm just thinking of like fire coming down from the sky, burning me.
It actually, that's it really, we laugh about it, but when you think about, perhaps you might have had this experience at work where speaking up has come back to bite you. Mm-hmm. And speaking up.
Or work.
Exactly, or it's opposite, because you think that you've got bright ideas, why don't you fix this? Or also, and some of those retribution might be some really subtle. You get passed over for promotions or for development opportunities, or you can see you speaking up has somehow shifted the dynamics in terms of how people relate to you. So there is a cost, sometimes a personal cost that comes with speaking up, because psychological safety is a responsibility not just for the individual. It should also be a leadership expectation.
That's so good. So I suppose, I feel like this is one of those scenarios where it sounds really good conceptually, and I'm thinking, it would be amazing to work in a team like that. Except for now I have my own business, I have people working for me. So how does this work when, let's say, people raise issues and for whatever reason, they might be completely valid, you completely agree with them, but for whatever reason you can't fix them? Like maybe, it's a 6-month time we can get to this, but right now we have to deliver on what we've got. So how do you, is there not an element to this where, okay, you've given people permission to speak, they're speaking up, but ultimately the decision is to, I don't want to say ignore because you have heard them, but you can't implement what they've raised? Does that not cause people to feel less safe? Does that make sense what I'm kind of get at?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that psychological safety isn't this fluffy thing. It's psychological safety is not about being nice. Absolutely, you can be kind in the way that you approach it, but it's not about being nice. And psychological safety isn't about comfort. Safety is about feeling protected from danger, which might be retribution. So it's about feeling protected, whereas comfort is feeling at ease. And I think I'm saying that, James, in terms of your point, psychological safety it's a hard concept to understand, and I think it's sort of migrated a little bit to be about the individual. Psychological safety is about the interaction of teams. And while there's individuals in that teams, it's important to, when you're creating a culture of psychological safety, the idea is that people have robust conversations and people are heard. You're never going to be able to implement every idea that comes to the fore. The idea is that people feel valued in the opinions that they bring, that there's an expectation to bring those opinions, but ultimately at the end of the day, particularly with those diverse opinions, you have to land on something, and you have to make decisions about where you invest, and you have to make decisions about projects you're going to take on. And so at the end of the day, it's not about being nice and not hurting people's feelings because they've said something and we're not going to go down that path. It is about the conversation happening, the contribution that people bring being put on the table, and then making the best decision with that information to move forward. But it's absolutely about not protecting people in terms of that comfort or that niceness. And I do think it's sometimes there's a crossover about the way people view psychological safety.
So good. That's really good. Probably, did you have something you wanted to add to that, Sam?
Yeah, I think I really wanted to echo the idea that psychological safety is not a soft, one of those soft, fluffy. It doesn't even imply that we are holding hands and singing Kumbaya. It's actually quite the opposite. Because we know that psychological safety is one of those indicators for high-performing teams, that actually then means that in that team, there is an expectation that my idea may not be the best idea. So that my idea is someone else's. So sometimes in the meeting that you'll hear someone go, oh, that's actually, I didn't think about it that way. And we start to build upon that idea. That is what it actually means to be psychologically safe. It's not, yes, it is about expectation to voice your opinion, but it also, there is the maturity that psychological safety brings to the team in acknowledging that my idea may not be the best one and my idea may not be the way forward. And I'm actually okay with it because we're not dealing with personality. We're dealing with, what's best for the team and what success looks like for the team.
I love that. It's almost like psychological safety for the leader as much as it is, or I would say the leader, but the decision maker as much as it is for the people contributing to that, the inputs for that decision to be made. That's brilliant.
That's actually quite right. The leader has a key role to play in that. And in the study that you mentioned earlier, the Harvard study, they did a couple of things. And one of the key things that they did was actually working and enhancing the leadership capabilities around psychological safety and what it looked like for the leaders to role model it first. So when the leader can actually take a step back and say, I don't know all the answers, what do you guys think? That is part of psychological safety.
Yeah.
And role modeling that to the team when their idea is not the best, then be able to accept and acknowledge it and let the other people lead in terms of taking ownership of project or whatever it is that the team is focused on. Yeah.
That's so good. So I've got one more question, then I really want to ask some practical steps. Almost every business owner who's had people work for them for a while has a scenario that's probably playing in their head right now, which is that's great and it's cool when you've got a high-performing team, everyone's motivated by success, things are going well. Then you come across that person who is constantly, they almost become problematic in the way that they bring up things, the consistency of bringing it up, they major on the same thing over and over again. It gets to the point where it starts to drag the whole team down, it destroys morale and people don't want to deal with that person. And obviously you've got to try and be sensitive about it, but ultimately that can be a really big problem for businesses who ultimately they have to deliver because otherwise they're not making money, no one has a job anymore. So how do you balance that kind of scenario when you want to create a psychologically safe place, but you also have to do the performance management piece?
I'm going to just go back to what I said earlier around psychological safety is an attribute of people interacting around a team. And I think what we often hear, definitely in the work that we do, we often hear people talk out and say, I don't feel psychologically safe. And I think it's a misrepresentation of the concept of psychological safety. And I think if people are aware that psychological safety is about the ability to express your opinion and robust conversations and speaking up if you think things are going poorly, and we remember that and we set the culture and remember that psychological safety isn't about being nice or about being comfortable, then it does lay the platform for you to be able to performance manage people who are not aligning with the culture as you would with any other cultural issue or performance issue that comes up. And if you're very clear about what psychological safety looks like and how it works in the team that you have, and again, I can't emphasize enough about it's not about being nice and people feeling comfortable. You can go through acquisitions and mergers, you can have redundancies, you can have people's project not proceeding, and you can do that in a kind and human way and still have a culture of psychological safety. And so I think laying those foundations and being really clear yourself about what psychological safety means, it helps you avoid the fact that you can't have a difficult conversation about performance or about cultural fit with an individual.
Yep.
Those two things can exist.
Right. I love that. So it's not mutually exclusive.
No.
Thing. That's great. Okay, so I mean, I really want to keep going, and in the next episode, I'll continue this conversation. But what are some practical tips that a business owner could take away from this about? Okay, great. Bought into this culture, psychological safety. Want to do that? What are like 2 or 3 steps I could take today or tomorrow that would start that implementation of psychological safety?
Firstly, I'll probably say the mindset shift around psychological safety that would really improve how the success of the organization is actually understanding that it is not the HR initiative as what people would think is like, the stuff that only the HR does. Is actually, it's a very strategic initiative that can help you and your organization succeed.
Some practical steps that you can take as a leader to start to promote psychological safety, and remembering that psychological safety isn't something that HR implement. It is the culture and the leadership style that you bring to a team. Some of the practical tips are really starting to encourage people's diversity and set those expectations about people's opinions, and bring them to the fore and have forums and conversations where you are encouraging people to bring their opinions forward. But more importantly, it's what you do when those opinions come forward and how you manage those. So start to be really intentional around eliciting people's opinions and people's values, and being careful about, particularly when you're starting on this journey, about how you manage those when they come forward. The second thing I'd say is be prepared to change your mind. So demonstrate that you might have a very fixed view about how the way things are going to be done. And when you start to get the differing opinions, be open to changing your mind and role modeling that the value of that contribution that others have made. And the third thing I would say is I'm not suggesting we celebrate failure, but really encourage risk-taking and reward risk-taking, safe risk-taking, even if it doesn't pay off. So if people have innovation and new ideas and they want to try things, particularly in this fast-paced environment, that you recognise and reward the initiative and move forward with the next initiative. So as 3 things as a leader that you can really start to do from you and your leadership style to start to really create that foundation of psychological safety.
Yeah. From organization point of view, I think a couple of key things. Invest in your leaders and your managers, because they are key to ensuring that there is that flow on from top down, making sure that there is that psychological safety from the leadership perspective all the way to the ground. Lastly, I think it's important to understand and to develop measures of success. How would you know what problems are you trying to solve? How would you know that we were successful? Need to really think specifically about some of the indicators that will tell you exactly how you're traveling, and have some sort of intervals and monitoring systems that will allow you to be able to know where your return of investment is. Because we do know from studies that, for instance, one of the studies done by the PwC found out that for every $1 that you invest, you get about $2.50 in return of investment. You can only know that if you did have pre-measures that you can measure throughout as you engage in psychological safety in your organization.